What if everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle was a lie? What if the fairy tale of the self-made Hollywood star who captured a prince was really something much darker, much more calculated? That's exactly what Tom Bower, the 85-year-old royal biographer with nothing to lose and a reputation for brutal honesty, is saying. And his latest revelations might just finish Meghan's brand once and for all. Now, Tom Bower isn't some random gossip blogger. This is a man who spent decades dissecting public figures, tearing through their carefully polished images until nothing is left but the raw truth. So when he sets his sights on Meghan, people don't just roll their eyes. They sit up, they take notes, and they brace for impact. And impact is exactly what he delivered. Bower isn't nibbling around the edges of Meghan's story. He's swinging at the very foundation, the narrative she's been selling since the moment she stepped onto the royal stage. The self-made actress, the hard-working outsider, the woman of authenticity. According to him, it's all a performance. And like any performance, eventually the lights come up, and the audience sees what's really there. But that's just the beginning, because Bower didn't stop at Meghan's contradictions. He dug into the rumors she spent years trying to bury, and what he found was even more explosive. For years, Meghan has branded herself as the self-made Hollywood striver, the girl who worked her way up from bit parts on TV to royal palaces, fueled only by grit and ambition. It's a story the public wants to believe. But according to Tom Bower, that version leaves out some very inconvenient details. Here's where the infamous yacht girl rumors creep in. Whispers of Meghan networking her way up through powerful men, exclusive yacht parties, and connections that magically open doors. She's denied it all, called it sexist, defamatory, pure fiction. But the problem? Those whispers have been around for over a decade. Most rumors fade with time. These ones have only gotten louder. And Bower says there's a reason why they fit the bigger pattern. A pattern of carefully shaping her image, reinventing herself for every new stage, and constantly rewriting the past to suit the present. On the surface, that's savvy PR. But when the cracks show, the whole image starts to look less like ambition and more like calculation. And here's the kicker. Bower isn't saying this is just ancient history. He argues this yacht girl playbook never really stopped. It simply got rebranded for Netflix deals and red carpet appearances. But if you thought that was brutal, wait until you hear how he ties Meghan's story directly to Princess Diana. If there's one comparison Meghan has leaned on more than any other, it's with Princess Diana. From wardrobe choices to camera poses, even down to the tilted head and doe-eyed look, it's like Meghan has been studying Diana's greatest hits and trying to recreate them frame by frame. The problem, according to Tom Bower, you can't copy authenticity. Diana's vulnerability wasn't staged. It was raw, tragic, and painfully human. Meghan's version, on the other hand, comes off like performance art. Instead of sympathy, people see theater. Instead of admiration, they see an imitation. And this is where the public started to roll their eyes. What was once framed as the new Diana quickly looked more like someone playing Diana. And nothing kills credibility faster than being called out as a knockoff. But Bower doesn't stop there. He argues that Meghan's obsession with Diana isn't just about style, it's about strategy. Every outfit, every public statement, every carefully leaked paparazzi shot, he claims, was designed to force that parallel in people's minds. The only problem, instead of elevating her, it made her look desperate. And if you thought that was awkward, wait until we revisit Meghan's most famous performance, the Oprah interview, because Bower says that's where the contradictions started stacking up like domino. Remember the Oprah interview? The one that was supposed to flip Meghan's entire narrative, painting her as the brave truth teller against the cold royal machine. For a moment, it almost worked. The world gasped, headlines exploded, and Meghan looked unstoppable. But then came the fact checkers, and suddenly, things didn't add up. She claimed she never Googled Harry before meeting him, except there were photos of her wearing Princess Diana's jewelry years earlier. She said she didn't understand royal protocols, except she'd been friends with people who lived in that world long before Harry came along. It wasn't just one or two oops moments. It was a pile of contradictions big enough to bury the entire interview. And as Tom Bower points out, once you tell enough stories that don't match, people stop trusting any of them. The Oprah sit-down wasn't the breakthrough Meghan hoped for. Instead, it became the moment the cracks in her narrative turned into gaping holes. And in Bower's eyes, that's when the tide started to turn. The sympathy faded, the doubts grew, and suddenly Meghan wasn't the underdog anymore. She was the unreliable narrator of her own story. But here's where it gets even more uncomfortable, because Bower claims this pattern doesn't just affect Meghan's public image. It cuts straight into the heart of her marriage. Remember the Oprah interview? The one that was supposed to flip Meghan's entire narrative, painting her as the brave truth teller against the cold royal machine? For a moment, it almost worked. The world gasped, headlines exploded, and Meghan looked unstoppable. But then came the fact checkers, and suddenly, things didn't add up. She claimed she never Googled Harry before meeting him, except there were photos of her wearing Princess Diana's jewelry years earlier. She said she didn't understand royal protocols, except she'd been friends with people who lived in that world long before Harry came along. It wasn't just one or two oops moments. It was a pile of contradictions big enough to bury the entire interview. And as Tom Bauer points out, once you tell enough stories that don't match, people stop trusting any of them. The Oprah sit-down wasn't the breakthrough Meghan hoped for. Instead, it became the moment the cracks in her narrative turned into gaping holes. And in Bauer's eyes, that's when the tide started to turn. The sympathy faded, the doubts grew, and suddenly Meghan wasn't the underdog anymore. She was the unreliable narrator of her own story. But here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Because Bauer claims this pattern doesn't just affect Meghan's public image, it cuts straight into the heart of her marriage. For a while, Meghan was Hollywood's golden ticket. She wasn't just another actress. She was a duchess, a royal with a California zip code. That novelty guaranteed her invites to the best parties, seats at the biggest events, and meetings with producers who usually don't return calls. But according to Tom Bauer, that shine has faded. Fast. Big-name producers have stopped picking up. Invitations that once came automatically are now mysteriously lost in the mail. And behind closed doors, the whispers are brutal. She's too hard to work with. She makes everything about herself. And worst of all, she brings drama everywhere she goes. In Hollywood, being talented is one thing, but being unpredictable, that's the kiss of death. Nobody wants to risk their project turning into the Meghan Markle show, especially if the only headlines it guarantees are negative ones. And this quiet exile isn't random. It's strategic. As Bauer puts it, people aren't rejecting Meghan personally, they're rejecting the chaos that seems to follow her like a shadow. But if Hollywood is slamming the brakes, then Meghan's carefully built media empire is in real danger. Because what happened next wasn't just embarrassing, it was a public collapse. If Hollywood's whispers weren't bad enough, Meghan's own media empire started to show cracks that turned into full-on fractures. The first major blow, Spotify. What was supposed to be a multi-million-dollar podcast deal ended with executives pulling the plug faster than anyone expected. Insiders claimed the content lacked depth, that it was all polish and no substance. Worse, rumors spread that Meghan barely did any of the work herself. In an industry obsessed with credibility, that was devastating. And if Spotify was the warning shot, Netflix became the cannon blast. Their big documentary deal was once hyped as a crown jewel. But the reality, viewership fizzled, critics shredded it, and the projects that followed failed to catch fire. Behind the scenes, executives began to realize the same thing. Too much control, not enough collaboration. Meghan's obsession with image made the projects feel less like entertainment and more like a PR campaign. Tom Bauer says this is exactly why the brand is collapsing. Meghan built her empire not on authenticity, but on carefully curated narrative. She wanted to be everything at once: the feminist hero, the rebel royal, the victim, the visionary, the mother, the outsider. But when you try to be all of those things at once, you end up being none of them. The contradictions cancel each other out, and audiences get tired of trying to keep up. Even worse, the business world took notice. Spotify and Netflix weren't just deals, they were signals to the entire industry. If companies that big walked away unimpressed, why would anyone else risk millions? Suddenly, Meghan went from royal goldmine to brand liability. But the collapse didn't stop at business deals. Even the royal family, who usually play the game of polite silence, decided it was easier to erase Meghan from the narrative altogether. And that silence is more powerful than any public statement. For centuries, the royals have mastered one thing better than anyone else: silence. They don't clap back, they don't rant online, and they definitely don't air dirty laundry on Oprah. Instead, they wait. They let the storm pass while they keep calm and carry on. And when it comes to Meghan, that silence has become deafening. King Charles barely mentions her name. Prince William? He won't touch the subject. Kate Middleton? She acts as if Meghan doesn't even exist. For a family that thrives on appearances, this cold shoulder is devastating. It's their way of saying, you don't matter enough to respond to. Tom Bauer argues that this quiet freeze-out is more damaging than any official statement, because silence makes Meghan irrelevant. Think about it. The woman who once dominated global headlines now gets left out of conversations entirely. She isn't the rebel shaking the monarchy anymore. She's the ghost they've chosen to ignore. And here's the kicker: the public seems to prefer it that way. Every time Meghan speaks, critics swarm. But when the royals stay silent, their approval ratings rise. The contrast couldn't be sharper. Meghan's noise versus the royal family's quiet. And in this battle, quiet is winning. But that wasn't the final blow, because while the royals erased her name, social media made sure she couldn't escape her past. If Meghan thought she could control her story through Netflix deals and polished interviews, she clearly underestimated the internet, because once social media turned on her, there was no going back. Clips from her Oprah interview get chopped into bite-sized memes, with sarcastic captions that rack up millions of views. Fact-checkers shred her claims within hours, exposing contradictions that make her look either confused or dishonest. Even old footage resurfaces. Meghan's speeches, red carpet soundbites, paparazzi shots, and they're suddenly being rewatched through a far more cynical lens. And the hashtags? Brutal, Meghan exposed, Sussex scam, Duchess of delusion. Each one trends faster than her PR team can react. What's worse is that even her die-hard fans, the ones who defended her for years, are starting to go quiet. Some have even flipped, openly questioning whether they were duped by her carefully managed image. Tom Bauer calls this the death of sympathy. Once people stop giving you the benefit of the doubt, every new story sounds fake, even if it's true. Meghan is living that reality in real time. The more she speaks, the more people roll their eye. And the more she tries to push the authentic outsider brand, the more the internet tears it apart with side-by-side comparisons, receipts, and ruthless commentary. The irony, Meghan wanted to own her narrative. Instead, she's become a character in someone else's meme site. And unlike Netflix, Twitter and TikTok don't sign contracts. They don't owe her a happy ending. But the real dagger in the heart of her brand came when the business world finally gave its verdict, and it wasn't pretty. In the end, Tom Bauer doesn't describe Meghan Markle as a villain or a victim. He describes her as something worse, a brand that collapsed under its own weight. For years, she built her empire on contradictions. The outsider who wanted to be an insider, the rebel who craved titles, the self-made woman who leaned on royal status. At first, it worked. She was fresh, different, and compelling. But contradictions don't last forever. They crack, and once they do, the whole structure falls apart. Spotify walked away. Netflix is cooling off. Hollywood has stopped calling. The royals erased her name from the conversation. Social media shredded the last bits of her credibility. Even her loyal fan base is shrinking. The image she tried to control so carefully has spiraled completely out of her hands. And here's the harsh truth Bauer hammers home. Sympathy doesn't come back. Once the public sees you as calculated, as fake, as manipulative, every move becomes suspect. Every smile looks staged. Every story feels like spin. That's where Meghan is now. Not just criticized, distrusted. She once dreamed of becoming the new Diana. Instead, she's become a cautionary tale. A story about what happens when controlling the narrative matters more than living the truth. And according to Bauer, this isn't just a rough patch. This is the point of no return. The fairy tale is over. What's left isn't a duchess, isn't a rebel, isn't even a brand people care about. What's left is fallout. And fallout, once it starts, only spreads.